13 celebrities with the most horrifying secret life. Behind the glamour and spotlights of Hollywood stardom lies a shadow world rarely glimpsed by adoring fans. While publicists craft perfect images and carefully worded press releases, the painful truth about some of entertainment's most beloved icons tells a very different story. Today, we're peeling back the carefully constructed facade to reveal the shocking private lives of celebrities whose public personas stand in stark contrast to their disturbing reality. From Golden Age legends to contemporary stars who are secretly loathed by everyone who works with them, these stories will forever change how you see these famous faces. What makes these revelations particularly shocking isn't just the behavior itself, but how successfully these stars maintained their public image while living completely different lives behind closed doors. The elaborate deceptions, the industry cover-ups, and the code of silence that protected these celebrities will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Hollywood's most famous names. But first, let's begin with America's beloved Christmas crooner, a man whose wholesome image masked a household ruled by terror and abuse. Singing part-time, and I thought I could be a lawyer because I'd been in a lot of elocution contests. Number 1. Bing Crosby, America's Christmas icon, or secret tyrant. Every Christmas season, Bing Crosby's velvety voice fills homes across America with the nostalgic warmth of White Christmas. His easy smile and casual charm made him seem like everyone's kindly uncle, the embodiment of mid-century American wholesomeness. But behind this carefully crafted public image lurked a man his own children barely recognized. Dad was not the man America thought he was, revealed Gary Crosby, Bing's oldest son, in a shocking memoir that ripped away the facade. He was a disciplinarian to the extreme. The belt was his weapon of choice. According to Gary and his brothers, life in the Crosby household was defined by rigid rules, brutal physical punishment, and emotional coldness that left deep psychological scars. The boys described being weighed weekly and beaten if they gained even a single pound. A disturbing contrast to Crosby's jovial, easygoing public persona. What made this private tyranny particularly chilling was Crosby's ability to compartmentalize, to shift seamlessly from terrorizing his children to embodying America's favorite entertainer. Studio executives and publicists worked tirelessly to suppress rumors of trouble at home, creating an early example of the Hollywood image machine at its most effective. Bing ruled his household like a military camp, while selling himself as the ultimate family man, explained a longtime family associate who witnessed the disconnect. The boys were expected to call him sir and stand at attention when he entered a room. The Christmas specials where they performed as one big happy family were performances in the truest sense. The most heartbreaking aspect of the Crosby family tragedy was how thoroughly the public embraced the fiction while the reality remained hidden for decades. While America invited Bing into their living rooms as the ultimate father figure, his own children were living a nightmare behind the picturesque gates of the Crosby estate. Yes, a little bit. I watched your face. Number 2. Charlie Chaplin, the genius who preyed on teenage girls. Charlie Chaplin's little character embodied innocence and childlike wonder, touching hearts with his vulnerability and gentle humor. The real Chaplin, however, had a disturbing pattern that today would have immediately ended his career. A documented preference for extremely young women that repeatedly crossed both legal and ethical boundaries. Chaplin had a type, and that type was girls barely out of childhood, explained film historian Edward Marshall, who has studied Chaplin's private papers. His first marriage was to 16-year-old Mildred Harris when he was 29. His second wife, Lita Gray, was 15 when their relationship began and 16 when they married after she became pregnant. What makes this pattern particularly troubling is how Chaplin used his power and fame to access vulnerable young women. As one of the most influential figures in early Hollywood, he could offer star-eyed teenagers access to roles and opportunities that would otherwise be beyond their reach. This dynamic created profound imbalances of power that Chaplin repeatedly exploited. Court records from Chaplin's divorce from Gray revealed disturbing details that were considered scandalous, even by 1920s standards. Gray's complaint alleged Chaplin had demanded she perform sexual acts that were considered degrading, and when she refused, he threatened to destroy her career. The studio paid handsomely to suppress the most lurid details. The studio system enabled his behavior, noted a film archivist who has reviewed correspondence between Chaplin and studio heads. They would handle the payoffs, the settlements, the quiet arrangements with parents. They saw his conduct as simply part of the cost of keeping a genius happy and productive. Perhaps most disturbing was Chaplin's affair with aspiring actress Joan Barry, which resulted in a paternity suit. Though blood tests indicated Chaplin was not the father of Barry's child, the courts disallowed this evidence and ordered him to pay child support anyway, a reflection of how his reputation had suffered after multiple scandals. While modern audiences celebrate Chaplin's artistic contributions, the uncomfortable reality remains. The man behind the Little systematically pursued girls young enough to be his daughters in a pattern that spanned decades and damaged numerous lives. Number 3. Marlon Brando, a family life that became a horror movie. Marlon Brando revolutionized screen acting with his raw, vulnerable performances, creating unforgettable characters like Stanley Kowalski and Don Vito Corleone. But while Brando could convincingly portray both tenderness and strength on screen, his real-life family saga unfolded like a Greek tragedy, marked by neglect, violence, and devastating consequences that would destroy the lives of his children. Marlon's approach to fatherhood was essentially to be absent, either physically or emotionally, explained a longtime associate of the Brando family. He fathered at least 11 children with multiple women, but he didn't really raise any of them. He drifted in and out of their lives, leaving chaos in his wake. This neglect created a vacuum in which tragedy flourished. Brando's son, Christian, raised in an environment of privilege without boundaries, spiraled into addiction and violence. In 1990, Christian shot and killed Dog Draw, the boyfriend of his half-sister, Cheyenne, at the family's home on Mulholland Drive. The incident, allegedly sparked by claims that Drawlet had been abusing Cheyenne, resulted in Christian being sentenced to 10 years for manslaughter. The tragedy didn't end there. Cheyenne, already struggling with mental health issues, was so traumatized by the murder that she was unable to testify at her brother's trial. Her psychological state deteriorated rapidly, and despite multiple hospitalizations and treatment attempts, she died by suicide in 1995, hanging herself at her mother's home in Tahiti. She was just 25 years old. Marlon was destroyed by these events, but he couldn't escape his own responsibility, said a family friend who witnessed the aftermath. He'd created this world where his children had wealth and fame, but no structure, no boundaries, no real parenting. The consequences were devastating. What makes Brando's family tragedy particularly poignant is the contrast between his artistic sensitivity and his personal failings. The man who could access profound emotional depths on screen seemed unable to forge meaningful connections with his own children, a disconnect that ultimately led to destruction. As Brando himself later admitted in a rare moment of self-reflection, "I think I failed as a father. The truth is, I don't think I was much of a father. Actors don't make good fathers generally because they're away from home so much. I went to lose a jolly hour on the trolley and lost." Number 4. Judy Garland, a studio-manufactured addiction. America fell in love with Judy Garland as the innocent Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz, her pure voice promising that dreams really do come true. Somewhere over the rainbow, few realized they were watching a 16-year-old girl already trapped in a nightmare of studio-enforced drug addiction that would ultimately claim her life. What MGM did to Judy Garland was nothing short of criminal by today's standards, explained a former studio employee who worked at MGM during Garland's contract years. They started her on pills when she was just 13 years old, amphetamines to lose weight and maintain energy through punishing filming schedules, followed by barbiturates to help her sleep. She never had a chance. Studio head Louis B. Mayer and his executives were obsessed with maintaining Garland's girlish figure, subjecting her to constant criticism about her weight and normal adolescent development, memos from production. Meetings reveal executives referring to her as the little hunchback and strategizing ways to keep her thin at all costs. The studio's solution was chemical, amphetamines to suppress her appetite during the day, barbiturates to counteract the stimulants at night. This studio-mandated regimen created a dependence that would haunt Garland for the rest of her life. By age 18, she was a full-blown addict, functioning on screen, but increasingly unstable off it. The studios had doctors on the payroll who would prescribe whatever was needed to keep the talent working, revealed a retired MGM production assistant. They weren't treating illnesses, they were managing assets. If a prescription kept a valuable star on schedule, no one questioned the long-term consequences. As Garland aged out of the wholesome roles that had made her famous, her addiction worsened. Multiple suicide attempts, Hospitalizations and erratic behavior marked her adult years. Despite brief periods of recovery and remarkable comeback performances, she could never fully escape the cycle of addiction that began when she was a child. When Garland died of a barbiturate overdose in 1969 at just 47 years old, the official cause was listed as accidental, but those who understood her history recognized a darker truth. Her death was the final act in a tragedy that began in the MGM commissary, where studio executives first decided that pills were the solution to transforming a normal teenager into a marketable star. And I don't mean it to. I applied for a job and got it. Only because I didn't know any better. Number 5. Rock Hudson, the star forced to live a lie. For millions of American women in the 1950s and early 1960s, Rock Hudson represented the ideal man. Tall, handsome, and masculine. The perfect romantic lead opposite stars like Doris Day. His easy charm and all-American good looks made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. But Hudson was living a carefully constructed lie, one that required constant vigilance and caused immense personal suffering. Rock essentially lived two completely separate lives, explained a former publicity agent who worked with Hudson's studio. There was the public Rock, the heterosexual heartthrob whose romantic escapades with starlets were carefully planted in fan magazines. Then there was the private Rock, a gay man who could only be himself within a very small, trusted circle. This deception wasn't a personal choice, but a professional necessity in an era when homosexuality was not only stigmatized, but criminalized in many states. When Hudson signed with Universal Studios in 1949, his agent Henry Wilson already understood the stakes. If Hudson's sexuality became public knowledge, his career would instantly be destroyed. The studio's protective measures were elaborate and methodical. Hudson was paired with young actresses for publicized dates photographed by friendly press. When rumors circulated about his sexuality, the studio arranged a marriage of convenience to Wilson's secretary, Phyllis Gates. The marriage lasted just 3 years, and later, Gates claimed she had been unaware it was a sham when she entered into it. The pressure of maintaining this facade was immense, recalled a close friend of Hudson's from this period. Even in private homes, there was always fear. Were the neighbors watching? Was someone going to talk to the press? Could a casual comment destroy everything he'd worked for? He never got to relax and just be himself. What makes Hudson's story particularly tragic is how his carefully maintained secret eventually became public in the most devastating way possible. In 1985, Hudson became one of the first major celebrities to die of AIDS, a condition that, especially in the early years of the crisis, was strongly associated with homosexuality. His illness and subsequent death shocked America, forcing a public reckoning with the reality that this icon of heterosexual masculinity had been gay all along. The revelation came too late for Hudson to experience the freedom of living authentically, but it marked a turning point in public awareness of both AIDS and the human cost of forcing LGBTQ individuals to hide their true selves. Oh, I see you're afraid to try my suggestion. Number 6. Loretta Young, the hidden daughter she adopted herself. Loretta Young built her career on playing virtuous, moral women whose goodness ultimately triumphed over adversity. Off-screen, she was known as a devout Catholic who maintained high ethical standards in an industry, often lacking them. But behind this carefully maintained image lay a secret so painful and complex that it would remain hidden for decades. Young had conceived a child with Clark Gable, and then orchestrated an elaborate deception to adopt her own biological daughter. The story began in 1935 on the set of The Call of the Wild, where Young and the already married Gable had a brief affair. When Young discovered she was pregnant, she faced an impossible choice. A public scandal that would destroy her career and reputation, or a cover-up that would require lifelong deception. In today's world, an actress having a child outside of marriage might generate some tabloid interest, but in the 1930s it would have been career-ending, especially for someone with Loretta's good girl image, explained film historian Barbara Hall. She made the only choice she felt she could under the circumstances. Young's solution was both ingenious and heartbreaking. She disappeared from public view, claiming illness, and secretly gave birth to her daughter Judy on November 6, 1935. Then, in an elaborate charade orchestrated with help from her mother and sisters, Young adopted her own biological child 19 months later through a Catholic orphanage. The deception required constant vigilance. Young lived in fear that someone would notice Judy's resemblance to Gable, particularly her distinctive ears. According to family insiders, Young even arranged for her daughter to have cosmetic surgery on her ears at age 7 to minimize the resemblance to her famous father. Loretta created this fiction and then had to maintain it not just publicly, but privately, noted a distant family member who was aware of the secret. Judy grew up calling her mother Mama without knowing the true nature of their relationship. The psychological complexity of that situation, raising your biological child as your adopted child, is almost unimaginable. The truth remained hidden from Judy until 1966, when she was 31 years old. After hearing rumors, she confronted her mother, who finally confirmed that she was indeed her biological parent, and that Gable was her father. Young never publicly acknowledged the truth during her lifetime, maintaining the adoption fiction until her death in 2000. What makes Young's story particularly poignant is how it reflects the impossible choices women faced in an era when having a child outside of marriage could destroy not just a career, but a woman's entire social standing. The elaborate deception she maintained for decades was both a survival strategy and a burden she carried throughout her life. Oh, you mean my professional partner? She's like a little buttercup, number 7. Errol Flynn, the pirate with a dark side. On screen, Errol Flynn defined swashbuckling heroism with his dashing good looks, athletic prowess, and roguish charm. Films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood established him as Hollywood's ultimate action star, a man who fought for justice with a gleaming smile and perfect hair. Behind the cameras, however, Flynn's life was spiraling into a disturbing pattern of alleged predatory behavior, alcoholism, and violence that would eventually destroy his career and health. Flynn lived by the motto, "In like Flynn," a phrase that actually originated to describe his ability to talk his way past studio security. Explained a veteran Warner Brothers employee who worked during Flynn's heyday, but that phrase took on darker connotations as rumors about his private behavior spread through Hollywood. Those rumors culminated in 1942, when Flynn was charged with statutory rape of 2 teenage girls, 17-year-old Betty Hansen and 16-year-old Peggy Satterley. The subsequent trial became a media sensation, with Flynn's attorney successfully portraying the girls as sophisticated youngsters trying to exploit the star. Though Flynn was acquitted, the trial revealed disturbing patterns of behavior involving young women. The studio publicity machine worked overtime to salvage Flynn's image, noted a former publicist familiar with the case. They portrayed him as the victim of gold diggers and opportunists, but within the industry, people knew Flynn had a preference for very young women that went beyond this one incident. Flynn's behavior was enabled by a network of Hollywood fixers, studio protection, and a cultural environment that often blamed victims rather than powerful men. His autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, published posthumously, alluded to countless sexual conquests without acknowledging the troubling power dynamics and age differences involved. As Flynn's star power began to fade, his personal demons accelerated his decline. Alcoholism transformed the once handsome star into a bloated shadow of himself by his 40s. Friends described drinking binges that would last for days, often culminating in violent outbursts or complete collapses. Flynn's yacht, ominously named the Sarko, became notorious for wild parties where alcohol, drugs, and young women were in abundant supply. According to several accounts, Flynn would cruise along the California coast, hosting gatherings that grew increasingly desperate and dark as his career declined. By the time Flynn died in 1959 at the age of 50, his body was so damaged by alcohol and drug abuse that the coroner reported he had the internal organs of an elderly man. The swashbuckler, who had once leapt gracefully across the screen, died, broke, and physically ruined. His legacy forever tainted by the accusations that had followed him throughout his later career. Woman, you can see that much for yourself. Who was it that said this long disease my life? Well, it's coming to an end. Number 8, Mary Astor, the sex diary that shattered her career. Mary Astor created memorable roles as the sophisticated, intelligent woman in classics like The Maltese Falcon, where she perfectly embodied the mysterious Bridget Ornessy opposite Humphrey Bogart. Her screen persona suggested refinement and subtle complexity, qualities that made the revelations from her private diary all the more shocking when they became public during a vicious custody battle in 1936. The Mary Astor diary scandal was the 1930s equivalent of a celebrity sex tape being leaked, explained entertainment historian Margaret Williams. It created a public sensation that nearly destroyed her career and revealed just how wide the gap could be between a star's public image and private reality. The controversy erupted during Asta's custody battle with her ex-husband. Dr. Franklin Thorpe threatened to introduce Asta's private diary as evidence, claiming it contained explicit details of her affairs with multiple men, including prominent married celebrities. When portions were leaked to the press, the public was scandalized by the frank sexual content written in purple, ink by a woman they had viewed as the epitome of class. The diary contained entries about her affair with playwright George S. Kaufman that were extraordinarily explicit for the era. Noted a film archivist who has studied the case. She allegedly rated her sexual encounters and described them in detail that would be considered pornographic by 1930s standards. Newspaper headlines screamed about Asta's purple diary for weeks. What made the scandal particularly damaging was how it contradicted Asta's carefully cultivated screen persona. Studios had positioned her as intelligent but proper, sophisticated but moral. The diary revealed a woman with significant sexual agency and appetite, at a time when such qualities were considered scandalous in women. The full diary never actually made it into court. The judge deemed it inadmissible, and much of what the public knew about its contents came from rumor and sensationalized reporting. Nevertheless, the damage to Asta's reputation was severe. Studio executives initially wanted to cancel her contract and remove her from projects in production. What saved Asta was the intervention of director William Wyler, who refused to replace her in Dodsworth, which was already filming when the scandal broke. His support, combined with Asta's excellent performance in the film, gave her career a chance to survive the controversy. MGM put her on probation rather than firing her outright, explained a studio historian. They essentially told her that one wrong move, one hint of scandal, and her career would be over. She spent years rehabilitating her image and working under that shadow. The original diary was ultimately ordered destroyed by the court, though conflicting accounts suggest copies may have survived. Asta herself later claimed the most sensational quotes attributed to the diary were fabricated by the press, but the impact on her life and career was very real. A stark reminder of the different standards applied to men and women in Hollywood's golden age. With the award, that goes with the award. Then after the ballet, you retire to the grill area in the opera house where like a luncheon or meme. No, it's for dinner. Will you pay attention? Certainly. Number 9. Jerry Lewis, charity icon, monster dad. For decades, Jerry Lewis was America's clown prince, the manic comedian who mugged and pratfalled his way through films before transforming into the somber host of the annual Muscular Dystrophy Association telethon. His work raised more than $2.6 billion for Jerry's kids, creating an image of Lewis as not just a comedian, but a humanitarian dedicated to helping suffering children. Yet, as his biological children have revealed, Lewis's compassion rarely extended to his own family. Dad was Jekyll and Hyde, explained Gary Lewis, Jerry's oldest son, who found fame as the leader of Gary Lewis and the Playboys. To the public and his charity kids, he was this loving, caring person. At home, he was a terror, cold, distant, and sometimes cruel. Lewis had 6 sons with his first wife, Patty Palmer, during their 35-year marriage. Gary, Ronald, Scott, Christopher, Anthony, and Joseph. All have described growing up with a father who was physically present, but emotionally absent. A man who could turn on the charm for cameras and audiences, but seemed incapable of showing genuine warmth to his own children. He was so caught up in Jerry Lewis, the celebrity, that he didn't know how to just be a dad. Ronald Lewis revealed in a rare interview, "We were expected to call him Sir. He wanted respect, but didn't know how to give it. There were rules for everything. How to dress, how to eat when we could speak. Breaking those rules meant punishment." But the most painful chapter in the Lewis family saga involves the daughter the public never knew about. In the early 1960s, Lewis allegedly fathered a daughter, Susan, during an affair with fashion model Lynn Dixon. Though Lewis never publicly acknowledged Susan as his child, DNA evidence has supported her claim to be his biological daughter. Susan Lewis Minetti lived a life of financial hardship while watching her famous father raise billions for other children. When she reached out to him as an adult, she claims he rejected any relationship, refusing to meet with her or acknowledge her existence. The ultimate irony was watching him cry on television for children he didn't know while he pretended I didn't exist. Susan told reporters after Lewis's death, "He could have helped me with a fraction of what he raised. but he chose to act like I was never born. The final insult came with Lewis's will. When he died in 2017 at age 91, he had explicitly disinherited all 6 sons from his first marriage. His estate, estimated at around $50 million, went to his second wife, Sandy Pitnick, and their adopted daughter, Danielle. He took his grudges to the grave, noted a longtime associate of the comedian. For a man who built his public image around helping children, his treatment of his own kids reveals a profound disconnect between the public Jerry and the private one. Gene Tierney, the fan who ruined her life. Number 10. Gene Tierney embodied elegance and beauty in films like Laura and the Razor's Edge, her striking features and refined presence, making her one of the most luminous stars of the 1940s. But behind her perfect appearance lay a tragedy so cruel and random that it would eventually contribute to her mental collapse. A chance encounter with a fan that destroyed her daughter's health and ultimately Tierney's own stability. What happened to Gene Tierney is one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking stories, explained a biographer who has studied Tierney's life extensively. It demonstrates how one moment, one interaction that seemed insignificant at the time, can set off a chain of events that destroys lives. The tragedy began in 1943, when Tierney was pregnant with her first child. Despite being advised to avoid public places due to a rubella, German measles outbreak, she made an appearance at the Hollywood canteen where stars entertained military personnel. Among the many fans she met that night was a woman who would later have devastating significance. Tierney's daughter Daria was born severely disabled, blind, deaf, and with significant cognitive impairments caused by congenital rubella syndrome. Doctors explained that Tierney must have contracted rubella during her pregnancy, but she couldn't recall being ill. The horrifying truth was revealed years later at another meet and greet event. A female fan approached Tierney and mentioned their previous meeting at the Hollywood canteen, adding a chilling detail. She had been sick with rubella at the time, but had broken quarantine because she so badly wanted to meet the star. When Gene understood what this meant, that this woman had knowingly exposed her to an illness that had destroyed her daughter's future, she was shattered, recounted a close friend of the actress. She said nothing to the woman. She simply turned away and later said she felt like she had been struck physically ill by the revelation. This knowledge became a psychological breaking point for Tierney, who had already been struggling with the challenges of raising a severely disabled child while maintaining her career. She began experiencing severe depression and was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, leading to multiple hospitalizations and several suicide attempts. At the height of her beauty and fame, Tierney underwent brutal electroconvulsive therapy treatments that affected her memory and cognitive abilities. Her career never fully recovered, though she did eventually find some stability with proper treatment and a supportive second marriage. Tierney rarely spoke publicly about her daughter, who spent most of her life in specialized care facilities. The extreme privacy around Daria reflected both the era's approach to disability and Tehran's own trauma around her daughter's condition and its cause. The cruelest part of Gene's story is the randomness of it, noted a film historian who knew Tierney in her later years. Had that fan stayed home as she should have, Daria would have been born healthy, and Gene's life would have taken an entirely different path. That one selfish decision by a stranger changed everything. Number 11. Dennis Hopper, a wild man who terrified his friends. Dennis Hopper created iconic moments in film history with roles in classics like Rebel Without a Cause, Easy Rider, and Apocalypse Now. His intensity on screen reflected genuine unpredictability of it. A volatile personality whose substance abuse, paranoia, and erratic behavior made him one of Hollywood's most feared and dangerous talents. Working with Dennis was like handling nitroglycerin, explained a producer who collaborated with Hopper in the 1970s. Brilliant, yes, a genius maybe, but at any moment, things could explode and destroy everything around him. Hopper's most notorious period came during and after the filming of Easy Rider. The surprise success of the counterculture classic gave him unprecedented power in Hollywood, leading to his next project, The Last Movie. Given complete creative control, Hopper retreated to Peru with a production team and enough drugs to fuel what many described as less a film shoot than a psychedelic commune. According to crew members who survived the experience, Hopper was often armed with loaded guns on set, firing them randomly during scenes and threatening people who questioned his increasingly incoherent direction. Fueled by a combination of cocaine, alcohol, and other substances, he would go days without sleeping, making impulsive, creative decisions that often required scrapping previous work. There were days when he'd bury himself in a coffin to prepare for scenes. Recalled a camera operator from the production, he'd emerge hours later, filthy and disoriented, and start shouting commands that contradicted what we'd been doing the day before. Hopper's behavior became so extreme that he was effectively blacklisted by major studios for nearly a decade following the last movie. His substance abuse escalated to the point where, by his own later admission, he was consuming half a gallon of rum, 28 beers, and 3 grams of cocaine daily. The paranoia that accompanied this substance abuse made Hopper particularly dangerous. During his marriage to Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas, which lasted just 8 days, he reportedly handcuffed her to prevent her from leaving, claiming she was part of a conspiracy against him. Other relationships followed similar patterns of control and volatility. What saved Hopper from complete self-destruction was a rehabilitation program in 1983, followed by sobriety, that allowed his career to experience a remarkable renaissance with roles in films like Blue Velvet and Speed. However, those who worked with him during his darkest period never forgot the experience. Even after he got clean, there was always that weariness around Dennis, explained a director who worked with him in the 1990s. People who hadn't been there in the 70s would ask why everyone seemed so careful around him. Those of us who knew wouldn't explain. We'd just say, you have no idea what he was capable of. Number 12, Ben Stiller, Hollywood's most privately hated comedian. On screen, Ben Stiller has created a gallery of lovably neurotic characters whose awkward mishaps and self-deprecating humor have generated billions in box office revenue. His films project an image of Stiller as the underdog, the relatable everyman trying to navigate a world that constantly challenges his dignity. According to numerous industry insiders, however, the real Stiller is anything but relatable to those who work under him, revealing a striking disconnect between his public persona and his behavior on set. Ben's public image as this nice, slightly neurotic guy couldn't be further from the reality experienced by crew members, revealed a production coordinator who has worked on multiple Stiller projects. There's a reason he's called the Antichrist on sets. His perfectionism crosses into cruelty, and his standards aren't just high, they're often impossible and arbitrarily enforced. Reports of Stiller's difficult on-set behavior have circulated in Hollywood for years, with crew members describing working environments characterized by fear, tension, and emotional outbursts. According to multiple sources, Stiller can swing from cold silence to explosive anger without warning, creating an atmosphere where everyone from cinematographers to production assistants walks on eggshells. There's a difference between being a perfectionist and being abusive, explained a veteran camera operator who vowed never to work on another Stiller production. I've worked with many demanding directors and actors who still treat people with basic respect. With Ben, there's this undercurrent of contempt for anyone he considers beneath him, which is pretty much everyone except other A-listers. This alleged contempt manifests in various ways. According to those who have worked in Stiller's orbit, multiple assistants have described being bred for minor mistakes like slightly incorrect coffee orders or scheduling conflicts beyond their control. Others report Stiller refusing to learn the names of crew members or acknowledging their presence even after working with them for months. He once walked past me every day for 14 weeks, never made eye contact or spoke a single word, then exploded when I was 5 minutes late. Returning from lunch, claimed a former personal assistant. He screamed that I was disrespecting his time in front of the entire crew. That was the only direct interaction we had during the entire production. What makes these allegations particularly striking is how they contradict the public's perception of Stiller as a self-deprecating, humble presence. In interviews, he presents himself as thoughtful and grounded, often emphasizing the collaborative nature of film and expressing gratitude for his success. Even some of his co-stars have hinted at difficulties working with him. While few will speak on the record, anonymous comments from actors who have appeared in Stiller's films suggest that his controlling tendencies extend to his fellow performers, particularly those with less industry power. The laughs stop the second the cameras do, observed a supporting actor who worked on one of Stiller's hit comedies. Between takes, it's like the temperature drops 20 degrees. He's not joking around or building camaraderie. He's scrutinizing everything and everyone, and you can feel his disapproval radiating off him if he's not satisfied. Number 13. Chevy Chase, the most hated man in comedy. Chevy Chase rose to fame as one of Saturday Night Live's original breakout stars. His deadpan delivery and physical comedy launching him to film stardom with hits like Caddyshack, Fletch, and the Vacation series. For millions of fans, Chase represents a certain kind of irreverent, confident comedy that defined an era. Behind the scenes, however, his name has become synonymous with toxic behavior so extreme that it has alienated virtually everyone who has worked with him. In my 40 years in entertainment, I've never encountered someone who has burned as many bridges as Chevy revealed, a veteran SNL writer who worked with Chase in the early days. He's the only performer I know who is actively disliked by almost everyone who has collaborated with him, from castmates to directors to the crew members who bring him coffee. Chase's difficult reputation began during his brief original tenure at Saturday Night Live, where his egotistical behavior reportedly created tension with other cast members. After leaving the show for a film career, he returned to host several times, with each appearance seemingly more controversial than the last. When Chevy returned to host in the 1985-86 season, he suggested a skit where Terry Sweeney, an openly gay cast member, would be weighed on air each week to see if he had contracted AIDS, recalled a writer from that era. This wasn't edgy humor. It was outright cruelty. The suggestion horrified the writing staff. Chase's behavior allegedly worsened as his film career declined in the 1990s and 2000s. Stories of verbal abuse, racist comments, and physical altercations followed him from project to project. His brief return to television comedy on Community in 2009 brought his difficult reputation to a new generation when conflicts with creator Dan Harmon and other cast members became public. Co-star Donald Glover later revealed in interviews that Chase had made racist comments to him during filming, allegedly telling Glover, "People think you're funnier because you're black." Other cast members described an environment where Chase would make derogatory remarks, then dismiss any offense taken as oversensitivity. "There's something deeply sad about Chevy," observed a director who worked with him in the 2000s. "It's as if he never developed past the emotional age of an insecure 13-year-old bully. He puts others down to feel superior, and he seems genuinely surprised when people don't want to work with him again." Perhaps most telling are the comments from SNL creator Lorne Michaels, who rarely speaks negatively about talent. In an unguarded moment, Michaels reportedly said of Chase, "He made comedy feel dangerous, but not in a good way." This observation captures the essence of what many have experienced with Chase, a sense that his humor often comes at someone else's expense. Driven by cruelty rather than creative joy, Chase's alienation from the comedy community became painfully apparent during a 2018 Netflix special, Saturday Night, exploring the show's early years. While other original cast members shared warm memories and maintained friendships decades later, Chase appeared isolated and bitter, his segments contrasting sharply with the camaraderie